Hey, welcome to the Actor's Career Compass, where we give actionable, bite-sized tips to help you navigate your acting career. I'm your host, Martin Benson, and today we're going to be talking about how to start auditioning for Disney. So Disney is one of the most well-known and influential production companies out there. They have tons of audition opportunities, and those auditions are not just for movies they make, but they're also for streaming shows on Disney Plus, commercials, even live performances at their parks or on their cruise ships. It's really cool. The thing is that finding auditions for Disney can feel a little bit challenging, especially if you're starting out and you don't yet have any connections. So that's what we're going to be talking about, is where do you actually find these auditions? Now, you have to first be aware of the difference between submitting yourself and auditioning, okay? So the way that it works is first you will find the audition opportunity, and then you will submit your materials, meaning your headshot or your resume. You'll submit those things to be considered. It's kind of like a job posting. If you're looking for a job, you go to a job board and you submit your materials. You send in your resume and a cover letter, and then you'll be considered. And if they like what they see in that initial application, they will call you in for an interview. And in this case, if they like what they see in your headshot and your acting resume, then they'll call you in for an actual audition, or they'll invite you to do something called a self-tape, which is where you record yourself auditioning and you send in the video file so that they can see what you look like on camera. And then some of them will invite you for a callback or an in-person audition where they actually bring you live to meet with them. Now, in this episode, I'm not going to explain how to submit yourself properly. That's a bit beyond the scope of what we're going to be discussing in this particular podcast episode. And it also can change from audition to audition based on the requirements. You know, some auditions may require you to submit a cover letter, others might not. So we're not going to be talking about that. Instead, we're primarily going to be focusing on where to actually find the auditions. Once you find them all, then you'll get the instructions and you'll know what to do. Now, at the end of this episode, I will also share a little bit of info about one of my courses that is designed specifically to help you get as many auditions as possible by honing your submissions process. So in other words, you can find the auditions using what you're going to learn in this episode, and then the way that you submit and what you say in your cover letter and what your headshot looks like and how specific you are with your types, as it's called. Those are things that, as you get better and better at those things, that you will start getting invited to more and more auditions. But for now, the most critical thing is, where do you actually find them? Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about. So let's dive right in. So there's a few different places that you can find them. We're going to go through 5, and the first of them is actually on the Disney Careers website. So if you go to a site called jobs.disneycareers.com, so jobs, Jobs, .Disney Careers, no space or dash or anything, just jobs.disneycareers.com. You can also type into Google Disney Careers auditions, and the specific page for auditions will show up. They're going to list lots of auditions, and in particular, these are going to be auditions for live performances throughout their parks, or in some cases on their cruise ships. Now, I know that if you're listening to this, you're probably looking for auditions in, screen acting and, ways to build up your acting career. But the fact is that if you get a job at one of their parks, it's a good way to sort of break the ice with them and start building your resume. If you have long-term goals to perform in Disney films because, that's what you really want, then having Disney-related credits on your resume, even if they're just performing in a park, it's just going to help build trust with them and they will more closely consider you for bigger film and, streaming jobs in the future. So that's the first one. Second way to find Disney auditions is actually using casting websites. So I dive deep on casting websites in my course called Kickstart Your Acting Career, which I'll explain a bit more towards the end of this episode. But there are certain websites online like Actors Access or Backstage where they frequently list open casting calls for Disney productions. Most of these open calls are for smaller parts, like 1 or 2 lines, or even more so, they're for background work. But again, getting a few Disney credits on your resume, even if it's just background or something very simple, can make it easier to get booked in a bigger role down the line. Now, the third way to find Disney auditions is through social media. So I definitely recommend following casting directors on social media who cast for Disney TV shows and streaming shows. It's going to be really hard to find who is casting for Disney films because a film is sort of a one-off project. So instead, you look for the different shows that are streaming through Disney Plus or other, the Disney Channel, and then you can search using tools like IMDb or IMDb Pro or another tool called Casting About. And you're just going to find which casting directors are actually casting the shows that you'd like to be in. And then you can usually find these people on social media if you search their names. Not everyone, obviously, is going to be on social media because some people just don't use it. But the idea is follow as many as you can, because occasionally the casting directors who do post on social media will list open calls that you can actually audition for or that you can just show up for. So now, in addition to following specific casting directors, you can also follow Disney's official social media channels as well, because sometimes they will post audition opportunities too. So that's social media. Now, number 4 is networking. Now, I know that most people don't like networking, but if you think about it as just simply keeping in touch with people that you know and building a genuine relationship with them over time, where you're kind of like just in touch and you become friends, it's a lot easier to think about networking that way. So it can really pay off big time to keep in touch with casting directors. Obviously, those who are involved in casting the shows that you'd like to be involved in. So I recommend targeting a few Disney-specific casting directors and then finding out if they're hosting any upcoming casting workshops where they're going to be teaching something. A lot of casting directors will teach these workshops. There is usually a fee, like maybe $50 or $75. Sometimes they're cheaper, sometimes they're more. But you can basically pay a fee and go either in person, or many of them are done online these days, and you essentially attend these casting workshops, and then during the workshop, you can ask some questions so that they start to know who you are and recognize your name. And then towards the end of the workshop, just ask if they're okay with you keeping in touch with them either via email or social media. Most of the time, they're going to say sure. And then occasionally, you're just going to reach out and ask them if there's any audition opportunities that you can submit a self-tape for. So that's like a direct message that you'll follow up with this casting director about. I have a much more in-depth program on, networking and how all of that works that I occasionally run live. I may be doing some podcast episodes on how to do networking in more depth, but the base idea of it is try to meet the casting director somewhere like a workshop, then keep in touch with them for a few months by just sending them some check-in emails that are friendly and not really asking for anything. And then eventually do ask for something and say, hey, I noticed that you're casting for X show. Do you have any roles that I might be good to audition for? And by that point, since they know who you are, it's much easier for them to be like, yeah, sure, there's this one character. Why don't you send me a self-tape? Now, the last way to find Disney auditions is to get an agent. And I know that, a lot of actors are thinking like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to get an agent, or they're like, oh, I have an agent already, but I never get anything from my agent. Well, as I've explained in previous episodes and as I write about in my emails, you do need to have at least 3 to 5 credits, speaking credits. They don't have to be for Disney, but they could be for little small productions like student films or whatever. Just small things like that before you start to reach out to legitimate agencies. But once you have a good agent, that person will actually do a much better job of getting you connected to bigger roles in Disney films and Disney streaming shows and TV shows, etc. So the way to do that is, first you want to look up different Disney productions that are shooting now. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to find which actors are in those productions. And you're not looking for the stars, you're looking for the actors who have very small credits, like maybe a few lines. These are called co-star roles. And then you're going to find out, again, using IMDb Pro, or you could try using Google, you want to find out who their agents are. So those actors who have small lines in Disney productions, figure out who is their agent. And then that's the agent that you want to try to get signed by. Sure, you might find like 50 different agents that represent actors who have been in Disney shows, but now you know 50 different agents who are probably likely to be able to get you connected to a Disney show. I have another podcast episode. It's actually the first one, I believe, that I did besides the intro episode. It's just called How to Get an Agent. And I definitely recommend checking that one out for more info on this. But again, you do want to wait ideally until you have at least 3 to 5 speaking credits, even if they're unpaid, small, tiny productions, before you go looking for an agent who can get you those much bigger roles. So regardless, that's pretty much it. And regardless of how new you are to acting or how old you are or how young you are, Disney is generally willing to work with all different people, but it will take some time before you're able to actually book some major Disney acting work. And that is, of course, why the sooner you start looking for real auditions and trying to build up your resume so you can get an agent, the better. So ideally by this time, let's say next year or latest the year after, you're acting in Disney consistently and you're well on your way to success. So before we wrap, I just want to briefly tell you about my mini course called Kickstart Your Acting Career. I mentioned this earlier in the podcast. It's basically a 5-day mini course that dives deep on how to start getting consistent auditions if you don't have an agent, credits, or reel yet. Getting a lot of auditions each month is going to be critical for building your resume so that you actually do have a shot at getting an agent and then eventually connecting yourself to much bigger productions like major Disney roles. So if you're interested in this course, it's priced very affordably for people. Visit the website kickstartminicourse.com. So again, that's Kickstart, M-I-N-I, mini course, kickstartminicourse.com, and you can see the pricing point and read more about what's involved in the course, and you can sign up. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for listening. All I do have for you is one ask, which is if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show so that you don't miss future episodes. It also helps me by making these episodes much more easily findable for other actors as well. Thanks so much, and I will see you soon.